She thought she was walking into a quiet Friday night blind date with a younger brother who didn't care enough to show up on time. But the man waiting for her in the private room was Tang Jun-Ho, the cold, untouchable billionaire who hadn't felt a single pulse of emotion in 6 years. The second her eyes locked on his across the table, the carefully guarded walls of his empire shattered into dust, dragging them both into a secret that would threaten to destroy everything his family had built. Did he accidentally walk into a trap, or did fate just hand him the only woman capable of burning his world to the ground?
Welcome back, besties. If you are new here, settle in, because this story is about to take you on a wild ride. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you are watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't. Now, let's begin.
Lilia Mills had exactly one rule left in her life after the year she'd had. Never again let another person's plans decide her evening. So when her cousin Denise called her on a Tuesday afternoon, breathless and already talking before Lilia even said hello, Lilia should have known to say no immediately.
I need you to do me one favor. One, and then I will never ask you for anything again. You said that about the wedding. This is different. This is a blind date, Friday night. Nice restaurant, nice family. And before you say no, I already told them yes. You told them yes for me. His name is Tang Min-jun. Korean family, huge in shipping and logistics on the West Coast, and his older brother runs the whole company now. Betty, my coworker's cousin, set it up. This is not some app date, Lilia. This is a real family, good family. Trust me.
I don't need a good family. I need a quiet Friday. You've had quiet Fridays for 11 months. I'm not trying to fix you. I just don't want you disappearing into your apartment for another year. Please, one dinner. If it's terrible, I will personally drive to wherever you are and rescue you.
Lilia should have said no again. She'd said no to everything for almost a year, ever since the diagnosis that turned out to be false but had already taken the job she loved, and the fiancé who couldn't handle sitting in waiting rooms. She had rebuilt herself slowly, carefully, the way you rebuild a house after a fire, checking every beam before you trust it to hold weight. A blind date felt like exactly the kind of thing that could knock a few of those new beams loose. But there was something in Denise's voice that night, something tired and hopeful at the same time, and Lilia found herself saying the word she'd sworn off for 11 months.
Fine. One dinner.
She had no idea that the man walking into that restaurant on Friday would not be the man whose name was on the reservation. She had no idea that 4,000 miles of family history, boardroom politics, and a secret nobody in the Tang family spoke about out loud were about to collide with her ordinary Friday evening. All she knew, standing in front of her closet that night, was that she needed a dress that said "I moved on," even if she wasn't entirely sure that was true yet. Now let's step back for a second, because to understand what happened at that restaurant, you have to understand who Tang Jun-Ho actually was, and why a man like him would ever agree to sit through a dinner that wasn't even his own. Jun-Ho was 38 years old and had run Tang Maritime Holdings for 6 years, ever since his father's heart gave out in a boardroom during a shareholder call that nobody had the courage to end early. He inherited the company at 32, along with a mountain of debt his father had hidden from everyone, including his own sons. Jun-Ho spent 3 years rebuilding what should have taken 10. He slept 4 hours a night. He fired people he'd known since childhood because the numbers demanded it. He became, in the words of one departing executive, a man made entirely of schedules. His younger brother, Min-jun, was none of those things. Min-jun was 29, warm, restless, and had spent the last decade disappointing their mother in increasingly creative ways. A failed restaurant in Busan, a cryptocurrency venture that lost the family nearly $1 million before Jun-Ho quietly absorbed the loss without telling their mother the real number. A string of relationships that ended the same way every time, with Min-jun charming his way in and running the moment things asked anything real of him. Their mother, Tang Soo-yeon, had one theory about all of it, and she repeated it at every family dinner like scripture. Min Jun needed a good woman, someone steady, someone who would not let him run. "You found the numbers," she told Jun-Ho over tea one Sunday. "Find your brother a wife." "I run a shipping company, mother, not a matchmaking service." "You run everything else in this family," she said, not looking up from her cup. "Why not this too?" Jun-Ho had learned a long time ago that arguing with his mother cost more energy than simply managing the outcome. So he did what he did with every other problem that landed on his desk. He delegated it to someone competent, reviewed the shortlist his assistant compiled, and approved a name almost without reading the rest of the file. Lilia Mills, 34, freelance architectural consultant. No red flags, according to the background check his family insisted on running, which Jun-Ho privately found excessive and did not stop, because stopping things in his family required more energy than he had left most days. He booked the private room at Soline, a restaurant he used for investor dinners because it never leaked to the press. He told his brother to be there at 7 sharp, dressed properly, phone off, and for once in his life, do not be late. What Jun-Ho did not plan for, what no spreadsheet could have predicted, was his brother calling him at 6:40 that evening, voice ragged with panic.
"Hyung, I can't make it. There is an emergency with the restaurant investors. They are pulling out unless I'm in this meeting tonight. I swear to God, Hyung, I need you to just... I don't know, tell them I got sick. Cancel it, I'll make it up." "You cannot cancel on a woman 40 minutes before dinner." "Then go for me. Just for the first part. Tell her I'm running late from a work thing. Buy me an hour. I'll be there by 8, I swear." "I am not a placeholder for your dinner, Min Jun." Please, Hyung. This investor thing actually matters."
"I need this one to work." And there it was, the word that had controlled Jun-Ho's decisions since he was 32 years old. Need. His whole life had rearranged itself around what other people needed, what the company needed, what his mother needed, what his father's mess required someone sober enough to clean up. One more hour of sitting across from a stranger at a dinner table cost him nothing that mattered. Or so he believed, standing in the elevator on his way down to the car, straightening his tie without looking in the mirror, already composing the polite, efficient conversation he would use to fill 45 minutes until his brother arrived, and this stopped being his problem. He had no idea that the moment was about to become the most expensive miscalculation of his adult life. Lilia arrived at Soline 8 minutes early, which she immediately regretted, because it meant standing alone near the hostess stand feeling every part of the black dress Denise had talked her into. The restaurant was quiet in a way that felt deliberate, low light, private rooms, the kind of place where a $100 bottle of wine was considered the affordable option.
Reservation for Tang?
She told the hostess, feeling ridiculous saying a name that wasn't hers, for a man she'd never met, based on a phone call from her cousin. The hostess led her toward a private room at the back, and Lilia spent those few seconds doing the thing she always did before anything uncertain, running through every worst outcome, so that nothing left could surprise her. He'd be arrogant. He'd talk about himself for an hour. He'd check his phone under the table like she wasn't worth his full attention. She had a small, private list of every disappointing man from the last 2 years, and she fully expected to add one more name to it before dessert. She did not expect the man standing by the window when she walked in. He turned the moment the door opened, and for one full second, neither of them said anything at all. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit that fit like it had been made for exactly this body and no other, with the kind of stillness some men only get after years of forcing themselves to stay calm in rooms full of people waiting for them to fail. His eyes found hers and something in his expression shifted, just barely, like a man recalculating a number that had just changed on him without warning.
"You must be Lilia."
I am. And you're Min Jun?
There was a pause that lasted exactly 1 second too long.
"There's been a change of plans. My brother was called into an emergency meeting. I'm Jun-Ho. I offered to keep you company until he arrives."
Lilia felt something strange settle in her stomach. somewhere between disappointment and a curiosity she couldn't quite name. "So I'm having dinner with the understudy," she said, before she could stop herself. Something flickered across his face, quick and unguarded, an almost smile that vanished as fast as it appeared. "I suppose that's one way to describe the head of the company standing in for his little brother," he said. "CEOs don't usually do placeholder duty," Lilia said, sitting down across from him, because standing there any longer felt strange. "They don't," he agreed, taking his own seat. "This is new territory for me as well." The conversation that followed was not the conversation Jun-Ho had prepared for. He had planned polite questions, safe topics, the kind of small talk that filled space without requiring anything real. Instead, within 10 minutes, Lilia was telling him about the building she was currently consulting on, a community center in a neighborhood most developers had written off, and the fight she was having with the city over accessibility requirements that kept getting quietly dropped from the blueprints. "They always drop the ramps first," she said, cutting into her food without looking up. "Every single project, somebody decides accessibility is the expensive part, and they cut it before they cut the marble countertops in the lobby. And you fight them on it. Every time. I've lost 3 contracts over it. I don't regret any of them." Jun-Ho found himself leaning forward slightly, an old defense mechanism his body used only when a negotiation genuinely interested him, something that had not happened outside a boardroom in longer than he could remember. "You could avoid that fight entirely," he said. "Take the easier contracts." "I could," Lilia agreed, "but then I'd be building things I don't believe in, for people who never have to live in them. That's an expensive principle." "Everything worth having is," she said, and looked up at him directly for the first time since they'd sat down, and Jun-Ho felt that same strange recalculation happen behind his ribs again, the second time in 20 minutes. He asked her more questions after that, not the practiced kind, but the kind that came from actual curiosity, a sensation so unfamiliar to him that he almost didn't recognize what he was doing until his assistant would have already flagged it as inefficient. He learned that she'd grown up in Atlanta, that her father had been a contractor who used to take her to job sites on Saturdays and let her hold the blueprints like they mattered, that she'd spent the last year rebuilding something in her own life she wasn't ready to talk about with a stranger, even one wearing a very expensive suit. "Your turn," she said finally. "Tell me something real, not the company biography, something you wouldn't put on a business card." Jun-Ho considered lying, the way he did in every meeting that asked for more of him than strategy. Instead, he found himself saying something he had never said out loud to anyone outside his family. "I took over the company the week after my father's funeral," he said. "I was 32. I found out 3 days later that he'd hidden almost $200 million in liabilities from everyone, including me. I spent the next 3 years fixing it without telling my mother the real number, because I was afraid it would kill her the same way it killed him." The table went quiet. Lilia set down her fork. "That's not a business card thing," she said softly. "No?" he agreed. "It isn't. Does anyone know that? My brother knows part of it. Nobody knows all of it." He looked at her for a long moment, something unguarded moving behind his eyes. "I don't know why I just told you that." "Maybe because I asked," Lilia said. "Most people don't actually want the real answer. They ask, so you'll ask them something back. And you don't do that. I've had enough people not really listen to me this year," she said. "I try not to be one of those people myself." It was 7:52 when Min Jun finally texted. "Running 20 more min. So sorry. Order dessert without me." Jun-Ho read the message and felt, for the first time in longer than he could name, something close to relief that his brother wasn't arriving yet. Now here's where it gets complicated, because right about now, on the other side of the city, a phone call was already happening that neither Jun-Ho nor Lilia knew anything about. A phone call that would decide whether this dinner ever happened a second time. The call came from Tang Soo-yeon, Jun-Ho's mother, to a woman named Grace An, an old family friend who ran the most efficient information network in their entire social circle without ever holding a single official title. Soo-yeon had heard, secondhand through a cousin who'd heard it from the hostess herself, that her older son had shown up to her younger son's blind date instead of Min-jun.
He went himself? Jun-Ho does not go himself unless there's a reason. Maybe he was just covering for his brother. Jun-Ho has never covered for in his life without resenting every minute of it. Find out who this woman is. Everything. Before this goes any further.
What Soo-yeon did not say out loud, not even to her oldest friend, was the real reason her stomach had tightened the moment she heard the news. 6 years earlier, before the funeral, before the hidden debt, before any of it, there had been another woman. A woman Jun-Ho had loved quietly and completely in his 20s, before the company swallowed every part of him that used to want things for himself. Soo-yeon had ended that relationship herself, coldly and efficiently, because the woman had no family connections, no fortune, nothing the Tang name required of a wife at the time. Jun-Ho never fought her on it. He simply stopped mentioning the woman's name and buried himself in work so completely that Soo-yeon told herself, for 6 years, that she had done the right thing. She had never once considered what she would do if it happened again. Back at Solin, dinner had stretched well past what either of them had expected. The second course arriving and disappearing, while Min-jun's absence became less of an inconvenience and more of a quiet, unspoken relief, neither one said out loud. Jun-Ho found himself doing something he never did in any meeting, any dinner, any negotiation in the last 6 years. He was not checking the time. "Can I ask you something direct?" Lilia said, twirling the stem of her wine glass. "Please. Why did you actually come tonight? A man like you, running a company that size, does not have 40 free minutes, let alone the ability to just walk out and cover for his brother's blind date. There's an easier version of tonight where you send an assistant to cancel and nobody blinks." Jun-Ho was quiet for a moment, turning the question over the way he turned over every difficult negotiation, looking for the angle that would let him avoid the real answer. He found, to his own surprise, that he didn't want to avoid it. "My brother needed something from me," he said slowly. "That's the true answer, but somewhere around the second question you asked me tonight, I stopped thinking about him entirely." He met her eyes. "I haven't done that in a long time." "Stop thinking about the next obligation, I mean." Lilia's breath caught, just slightly, and she looked away first, toward the window, toward the city lights doing their slow blur against the glass. "This dinner wasn't supposed to go like this," she said quietly. "No," Jun-Ho agreed. "It wasn't." That was the exact moment the door opened, and Min-jun walked in, flushed and out of breath, straightening his jacket, already talking before he'd even fully entered the room. "I am so sorry. Traffic was insane. The meeting ran long. I promise I'll make it up." He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes moving from his brother's face to Lilia's and back again, and something passed across his expression too quickly for either of them to name, a flicker of understanding that neither of them wanted him to have. "Everything okay in here?" Min-jun asked, his voice lighter than his face. "Your date kept me excellent company," Jun-Ho said, standing smoothly, every trace of the last 40 minutes folded back beneath the composed executive he'd been his entire adult life. "I should let the two of you actually have your dinner." "You don't have to rush off," Min-jun said, and there was something underneath the words, something testing. "I have a call at 9, Jun-Ho said, which was true, and also the first excuse he had reached for in that room all night, that felt like a lie the moment it left his mouth. He looked at Lilia one final time, before he turned toward the door. "It was a genuine pleasure," he said, and the formality of it landed strangely between them, too careful, too controlled, a door being deliberately shut on something that had been wide open 5 minutes earlier. "Likewise," Lilia said, and watched him leave the room without looking back, though she noticed, and would think about later, the way his hand paused for half a second too long on the doorframe before he finally walked through it. The dinner between Lilia and Min-jun that followed was, by every objective measure, pleasant. Min-jun was charming in the effortless way he always was. Funny, attentive, generous with compliments that came easily, because he'd practiced them on enough women to make them sound spontaneous. He talked about his restaurant plans, his travels, his big ideas that always seemed to arrive faster than his follow-through. Lilia listened, laughed at the right moments, and felt, underneath all of it, a low, persistent hum of distraction she couldn't quite explain. A sense that she was comparing every sentence Min-jun said to the version of this conversation she'd already had with his brother. She hated herself a little for it. She barely knew either of them, and yet, walking to her car that night, she found herself thinking not about Min-jun's easy laugh, but about the way Jun-Ho's voice had dropped when he talked about his father, the way he'd said, "I don't know why I just told you that," like a man, surprised by his own honesty. She told herself it meant nothing. She had exactly one rule left after the year she'd had, and it wasn't about avoiding blind dates anymore. It was about not falling for men who came with more complications than she had energy to survive. She had no idea how badly she was about to break that rule. 3 days passed before Min-jun called her again, full of apologies for the rocky start and an invitation to a gallery opening that weekend. Lilia said yes, mostly because Denise wouldn't stop asking, and partly because she told herself that seeing him a second time would settle whatever strange unfinished feeling had followed her home from Solene. What she did not expect was for Jun-Ho to be standing in that same gallery, in the corner near a sculpture exhibit, when she and Min-jun walked in together. Their eyes met across the room, and something passed between them that neither brother could see, quick and unmistakable and entirely unspoken. Jun-Ho recovered first, offering a polite, distant nod, the kind you give a stranger, and turned back toward the man he was speaking with, an investor Lilia didn't recognize.
You didn't tell me your brother would be here.
He comes to everything. He is on the board of half the foundations in this city. You get used to him being in the room.
Does that bother you?
It didn't used to.
He said. Across the gallery, Jun-Ho was failing, for the first time in his professional life, to focus on a conversation that mattered to his company's bottom line. He kept losing the thread of what the investor was saying, his attention pulled again and again toward the sound of Lilia's laugh carrying faintly from across the room, toward the exact color of the dress she was wearing, toward the memory of her voice asking him a question no one had asked him in 6 years. "Why did you actually come tonight?" He excused himself from the conversation 20 minutes later and found himself, almost against his own will, standing near the sculpture exhibit where he knew, from the angle of the room, she would eventually walk past. She did, 15 minutes later, alone, having stepped away from Min-jun to look at a piece near the far wall. "You're staring at that sculpture like it owes you money," she said, coming to stand beside him. "I'm staring at it because it's the only thing in this room I've successfully looked at for more than 10 seconds tonight," Jun-Ho said, and immediately regretted the honesty of it, the way it slipped out before he could stop it. Lilia went still. "Jun-Ho, I know," he said quickly, quietly. "I know exactly what I'm doing, and I know exactly how it looks, and I want you to know I would never act on it. My brother is—" He stopped, searching for a word that wasn't a lie. "My brother needs this to go well. Our mother has decided this matters. I have spent 6 years managing what this family needs from me, and I am not going to be the reason it falls apart." "That's not what I was going to say," Lilia said softly. "I was going to say I've thought about our dinner more than I want to admit, and I don't know what to do with that, because you're right. This isn't mine to want." For a long moment, neither of them said anything at all, standing close enough that the noise of the gallery seemed to fall away entirely, close enough that Jun-Ho could see the exact moment she decided not to step back. "I should go," Lilia said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "You should," Jun-Ho agreed, and neither of them moved for 3 more seconds before she finally turned and walked back toward Min-jun, leaving Jun-Ho standing alone in front of a sculpture he would never actually remember, his heart doing something it had not done in 6 years, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Grace An called Soo-yeon back 4 days after the gallery opening, and what she found sent a chill through the older woman that had nothing to do with the weather. Her name is Lilia Mills, Grace said. 34. No major family money, like you thought. But Soo-yeon, there's something else. Her mother. Her mother's maiden name was Renata Okafor. Soo-yeon's grip tightened around the phone. That name means nothing to me. It should, Grace said carefully. Renata Okafor worked for your husband's company 22 years ago. She was the woman who discovered the first set of falsified shipping manifests, the ones that almost got the company shut down before your husband paid to make the whole investigation disappear. She was fired the same week. Nobody ever proved anything publicly, but everyone in the old circles knew what really happened. And Soo-yeon, I checked the dates. Lilia was 12 years old when her mother lost that job. 12 years old when the family that destroyed her mother's career was your husband's company. The silence on the line stretched long enough that Grace finally said her name twice before Soo-yeon responded. Does the girl know? Soo-yeon asked finally, her voice tight and controlled in the way it only got when she was genuinely afraid. I don't know, Grace admitted, but if she finds out who Jun-Ho's father really was, and what he did to her mother, this isn't going to be a quiet family matter anymore. This could become a very public problem for a company that's still recovering from 6 years ago. Soo-yeon set the phone down slowly, staring at nothing, understanding for the first time that the thing she had set in motion to secure her younger son's future had accidentally invited into her family the one person capable of unearthing the exact secret that had nearly destroyed it once already. She had no idea, sitting in that quiet room, that her older son had already fallen for the woman whose life her husband had quietly ruined 2 decades earlier. She had no idea that stopping this now would cost her far more than letting it continue ever could. And 400 miles away, in a small apartment she'd inherited from a mother who rarely talked about her old career, Lilia Mills sat at her kitchen table, going through a box of her mother's things, something she did every year around the anniversary of her mother's passing, and found, tucked into a folder she had never opened before, a name typed at the top of an old termination letter. Tang Shipping and Holdings, signed by a man named Tang Dae-hyun. Lilia stared at the name for a long time before the recognition hit her, cold and sudden, the way recognition sometimes does, arriving all at once instead of slowly. Tang, the same name on the reservation at Solin. The same name Jun-Ho carried like a second skin. She had spent an entire dinner talking to the son of the man whose company had destroyed her mother's career, and she had felt something for him she hadn't let herself feel for anyone in over a year. She sat with that box open in front of her for a long time that night, the folder trembling slightly in her hands, and she understood, with a clarity that frightened her, that whatever came next was going to test every single thing she believed about who deserved trust and who did not. Lilia did not call Jun-Ho that night. She did not call Min-jun either. She sat with the letter for 3 days, reading it over and over, trying to reconcile the man who had told her about hiding $200 million in debt to protect his mother, with the son of a man who had apparently destroyed careers to protect a fraud. She thought about calling her mother's old friend, the woman who might remember more of the story than what fit on a single termination letter. She thought about simply disappearing from both brothers' lives, the way she'd disappeared from everything difficult over the last 11 months. Instead, she did something harder. She called Jun-Ho directly and asked him to meet her, alone, somewhere that wasn't a restaurant his family used for business. They met at a small coffee shop near the waterfront, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and no reservation required, and the moment Jun-Ho saw her face, he knew something had changed. "What's wrong?" he said, not a question. "Did you know your father destroyed a woman's career 22 years ago?" Lilia asked, sliding the folded letter across the table without preamble. "A woman named Renata Okafor. She found falsified shipping manifests. Your father had her fired and buried the investigation before it went public." Jun-Ho read the letter slowly, his face going very still, the same stillness Lilia remembered from the first moment she'd seen him at Solin. I don't know this name, he said finally. I was 16 when this happened. My father kept everything from us. I told you, I found 200 million in hidden debt after he died. I have no doubt there's more he never let any of us see. She was my mother, Lilia said quietly. The words landed in the small space between them like something physical. Jun-Ho set the letter down slowly, and for a long moment he said nothing at all, staring at it like it might rearrange itself into something less impossible. Lilia, he said finally, his voice rough. I need you to understand something. I did not know. I would never have let my family bring you into a dinner, into any of this, if I had known there was history between us I wasn't aware of. I believe you, Lilia said. That's the strange part. I sat here for 3 days trying to decide if I could believe you, and I do, but that doesn't change what your father did. It doesn't change that my mother spent the rest of her life rebuilding a career your family took from her. It doesn't change that I don't know if I can be anywhere near your name without hearing hers. Jun-Ho was quiet for a long time, turning the letter over in his hands like it weighed more than paper should. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost all of its careful, practiced control. I spent 6 years cleaning up every mess my father left behind, he said. The debt, the board members who were terrified he'd bankrupt us, my mother, who still cannot say his name without her hands shaking. I thought I had found the last of what he broke. I was wrong. He looked up at her. I am not going to ask you to forgive a dead man for something he did to your mother, but I am going to find out exactly what happened, and I am going to make it right, publicly, whatever that costs the company. Not because it fixes anything for you, because it's true, and true things deserve to be said out loud, even 22 years too late. And what about us? Lilia asked quietly. Whatever this is, whatever it was starting to be. Jun-Ho was silent for a long moment. I don't know if there's an us that survives this cleanly, he said honestly, but I know I'm not going to pretend it isn't there just because it's complicated. I've spent 6 years choosing what my family needed over what I wanted. I am tired of it costing me everything, including now, possibly you. What happened over the following 2 weeks moved faster than anyone in the Tang family expected. Jun-Ho hired an independent investigator, outside the company entirely, to reconstruct exactly what happened to Renata Okafor 22 years earlier. He did it quietly at first. Then, when the findings confirmed everything the old termination letter suggested and worse, he did something his mother never anticipated. He called a meeting of the full board and told them the truth, unprompted, before anyone forced his hand. My father falsified safety and compliance records to protect margins on 3 shipping contracts in the early 2000s. He told the room, his voice steady, even as several board members went pale. When an employee named Renata Okafor discovered it and reported it internally, my father had her terminated and used company resources to suppress the story. When I found documentation of this 2 weeks ago, I am disclosing it to this board today, and I intend to disclose it publicly, along with a settlement offer to her family, because covering for what my father did is not something I am willing to do, even now, even though he's been dead for 6 years. The room erupted into arguments about liability, about stock price, about legal exposure, and Jun-Ho let them argue for nearly 20 minutes before he raised his hand for silence. I understand the risk, he said. I have run the numbers more times than any of you have this week, but I built this company back from nothing after he died, and I will not build the next 20 years of it on a lie he told 22 years ago. If the board wants to remove me over this decision, that is your right. But the truth is going out with my name attached to it, whether I'm still CEO when it does or not. Nobody voted to remove him. 2 board members resigned quietly over the following month, uncomfortable with what the disclosure meant for old alliances they'd built with Jun-Ho's father years earlier. The rest, to Jun-Ho's quiet surprise, stayed, and the company's stock dipped for exactly 9 days before recovering entirely, buoyed by an unexpected wave of public respect for a CEO who had chosen honesty over protection. Soo-yeon did not speak to her son for 11 days after the board meeting. When she finally called him, Her voice was different than he had ever heard it, smaller somehow, stripped of the sharp control she'd carried his entire life. "You could have buried it," she said, "like your father did, like I would have." "I know," Jun-Ho said. "Why didn't you?" Jun-Ho was quiet for a moment. "Because I met the woman whose life it broke," he said, "and I couldn't look at her and pretend I didn't know what our family cost her mother. I couldn't build anything real with her while carrying that lie. I'm done building things on what this family hides, Mother. I've spent 6 years doing exactly that, and I'm tired." There was a long silence on the line. "Is this about the girl?" Soo-yeon finally asked, and there was no anger in it this time, only something closer to exhaustion. "Yes," Jun-Ho said simply. "It's about the girl." Lilia received the settlement offer 8 days after the board meeting, along with a public statement from Tang Maritime Holdings, acknowledging what had happened to her mother, 22 years too late, but acknowledged all the same. She read the statement 3 times before she called anyone, and when she finally picked up her phone, it wasn't to call Jun-Ho, it was to call her aunt, the only person left alive who remembered exactly what those years had done to her mother. "She would have wanted this," her aunt said quietly, once Lilia finished explaining. "Not the money, baby, the truth. She used to say the worst part wasn't losing the job. It was nobody ever admitting she was right." Lilia cried for the first time in months that night, not from grief exactly, but from something that felt like a door finally closing on a room she'd been standing in for 22 years without knowing it. She called Jun-Ho 3 days later. "I don't know what this makes us," she said when he answered. "I don't know if I can separate you from what your name means to my family's history. I don't know if that's fair to ask of either of us." "I don't have an answer that makes this simple," Jun-Ho said. "I only have the truth, which is that I have thought about you every single day since that dinner at Solene, and I would rather spend the rest of my life slowly figuring out if we can build something honest than spend 1 more year pretending I don't feel what I feel because it's complicated." "Your brother," Lilia said softly. "Already knows," Jun-Ho said. "He figured it out the night he walked into that restaurant. He told me 2 weeks ago he never actually wanted this to work between the two of you. He said, and I'm quoting him exactly, 'You looked at her the way I've never once looked at anyone, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life competing with my own brother for something that was never really mine to begin with.' Min-jun, for his part, found something unexpected in the weeks that followed, something he hadn't been looking for at all. Free of the pressure to become the version of himself his mother wanted, he threw himself into rebuilding the restaurant venture that had failed years earlier, this time with Jun-Ho's quiet backing instead of his resentment, and discovered, slowly, that he was capable of finishing something he started when nobody was forcing him into it for the wrong reasons. Lilia and Jun-Ho did not rush into anything simple after that. They spent months building something slow and careful, the way you rebuild trust after a fire, checking every beam before you let it hold weight. Exactly the way Lilia had promised herself she would, if she ever let anyone close again. Soo-yeon never fully warmed to the relationship, but she stopped fighting it, and one quiet afternoon, nearly a year after that first dinner at Solene, she sent Lilia a single message that said more than any apology could have. "Your mother should have been believed the first time. I am sorry it took my son to finally say so." Lilia Mills had walked into that restaurant expecting one dinner with a stranger, a small favor for her cousin, nothing more. She left with a truth 22 years buried, a family confronted with its worst mistake, and a man who chose honesty over everything his name had ever protected, including himself. Sometimes the thing you think is the smallest decision of your week turns out to be the hinge an entire hidden history was waiting to swing open on. Sometimes the person sitting across the table from you is not who you were told they'd be, and that turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to you.
Thank you for staying till the very end. I need you to do one thing for me before you go. Drop a comment and tell me exactly which moment hit you the hardest. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update, and I'll see you very soon.